Okay, so today Donald Trump decided to declare martial law in DC, but this has happened a few times in the history of humanity, and I want to go over a few of those times that happened. But welcome. This is the Continuum. First, we go to the Philippines. In the 1970s, Manila was a city of contrast, gleaming hotels rising beside sprawling shanty towns. To Marcos, the Philippines' strongman ruler, those shanty towns were more than just an eyesore. They were an embarrassment. So, under the banner of urban renewal and modernization, he set out to erase them. When Marco declared martial law in 1972, he promised order, progress, and a new society. But behind those speeches and slogans was cold calculation. If the capital looked poor, the nation looked weak. And if a man obsessed with image, especially in front of foreign investors and dignitaries, that was unacceptable. The target was clear: neighborhoods like Toronado, San Andreas, communities alive with children, vendors, dock workers, but built without permits, without formal titles. To the government, they were squatters. Then came the demolition. Police, soldiers would arrive before dawn, bulldozers followed, and in many cases, residents were given hours, sometimes minutes, to gather what they could. Wooden walls were torn down, corrugated roofs were crumpled like paper. Marco had a plan for these people: relocation sites, far from the heart of the city, places with names like Sanpang Palai. But these weren't thriving suburbs. These were half finished settlements, miles from jobs, without clean water, without reliable electricity. For the families who moved there, life became harder overnight. The commute to Malawi was long and expensive. Many lost their jobs entirely. Food was scarce, disease spread easily. The promise of government support rarely arrived. And in those distant, forgotten neighborhoods, something unexpected happened. The very people Marcos had scattered began to organize. Priests, activists, labor leaders came to the relocation sites, teaching, rallying, building networks of resistance. What was meant to silence the poor gave them common cause. By the 1980s, angry over poverty, corruption, repression had reached a boiling point. The displaced urban poor, once visible, were marching in the streets, joining the protests that would swell into the People's Power Revolution. In 1986, Marcos fled the country. His beautiful Manila couldn't hide the truth. You can bulldoze homes, but you can't bulldoze resentment. History has a way of punishing leaders who mistake image for substance. In trying to clear the streets of the poor, Marcos cleared a path to his downfall. For our second story, we move to Rome, the Eternal City. By the 1920s, it was a city of ancient ruins, grand basilicas, and crowded medieval neighborhoods where families had lived for generations. But to Benito Mussolini, Italy's new fascist leader, those neighborhoods weren't part of Rome's charms. They were obstacles. Obstacles to his vision of a Rome reborn, clean, orderly, and unmistakably under his control. Mussolini didn't want to rule Italy. He wanted to rewrite its history, to cast itself as the heir to Caesar. And for that, he needed the ruins of ancient Rome on full display. The medieval streets and the tenants that had grown up around the Colosseum, the Forum, and other monuments, they had to go. The regime called it guttings. Whole districts were demolished. The blistering, tackily painted streets behind the Victor Emmanuel monument, gone. The most famous project was the creation of the Villa delle Appiarie, a wide parade road linking the Plaza Venezia to the Colosseum. It cut straight through centuries-old neighborhoods, wiping them from the map. Tens of thousands of Romans were forced out of their home. Many of them lived for generations. Their families, woven into the history of those streets, they were relocated to the Borgate, hastily built settlements on the outskirts of the city. These new districts are far from jobs, markets, and public transport. The housing was shoddy, the sanitation was poor, and in some cases, the promise of water and electricity never came. For Mussolini, the center of Rome now gleamed. Visitors saw wide avenues, ancient ruins, massive rallies marching past imperial monuments. But just out of sight, the displaced poor lived in worse conditions than before. The move deepened poverty, frayed social ties, bled quiet resentment against the regime. Resentment that would only surface when Italy's fortunes turned during the Second World War. The irony is hard to miss. Mussolini wanted to make Rome a symbol of fascist strength. Instead, he created a hollow stage set, a city center designed for parades, propaganda, but stripped of communities that gave it life. By gutting the heart of Rome's neighborhoods, he gutted part of its souls. And when the regime fell in 1943, no grand avenues could hide the truth. You can demolish a street, but you can't demolish the consequences. History remembers Mussolini's wide roads and clear basilicas, but it also remembers the lives uprooted to build them. The lesson that every leader should know: a city isn't made strong by erasing its people. Now we move to Kampala, Uganda, in the 1970s. A city alive with trade, music, and a growing urban population. But under the rule of Idi Amin, the capital would soon see entire neighborhoods emptied, not by choice, but by force. Idi Amin came to power in 1971 through a military coup. Charisma in public, brutal in private. He styled himself as a man of the people, but he was also obsessed with appearance. With presenting Uganda and its capital as modern, orderly, and under his firm control, in his eyes, Kampala's sprawling, informal settlements, crowded with the working poor, were a blemish, and worse, some of those communities had residents he viewed as politically unreliable. But orders were blunt: clear them out. Soldiers rolled into those neighborhoods with rifles slung and eviction notices in hand. Some families were told they had days to leave, others got no warning at all. Houses were bulldozed, markets torn down, entire streets wiped clean. The eviction targeted poor Ugandans, but also disproportionately affected certain ethnic communities and those suspected of opposing Amin's rule. Those removed from the city were sent to rural areas, far from jobs, schools, and healthcare. In many cases, they had no housing to go to, forced to rely on relatives and makeshift shelters. For Kampala, the impact was immediate. Businesses lost workers, markets lost vendors, neighborhoods that were once pulsed with life became silent gaps in the city's fabric. Amin's goal to beautify the city, to make it a showcase for visiting diplomats and dignitaries. But the reality was different. The evictions caused visible scars, empty spaces, economic disruption, and a deep sense of fear. Displaced communities began to turn against him. Many of those pushed out quickly became involved in anti Amin networks, passing information to rebels, sheltering dissidents, and simply refusing to cooperate with the regime. Uganda's economy, already strained by Amin's disastrous policies, like the 1972 expulsion of the Asian community, took another hit. The evictions removed thousands of workers from the urban economy, deepening shortages of food and basic goods. And for all the upheaval, Kampala didn't become a gleaming capital Amin envisioned. It had become a city of gaps, where the absence of people told its story. By the late 1970s, Amin's grip on power was fading. Foreign relations collapsed, the economy crumbled, and in Kampala, many of those who had been evicted were now actively rooting for his downfall. When Tanzanian forces and Ugandan exiles marched on the capital in 1979, they found little resistance in the street. Amin had spent years emptying neighborhood, scattering communities, alienating his own people, and when the time came, there was no one left willing to fight for him. Amin thought evictions could make Kampala a showcase. Instead, it made it a hollow shell and left his rule just as hollow. History's lessons? Clear. You can clear a city of its people, but you can't clear away the cost. So now we see that this is going to happen in DC as it happened in LA. For Trump, it sounds like he just wants to turn the city into a smart city, a city that is based solely on appearance. But we can learn through these stories that cities, they are their people. And when you remove or go after their people, you hurt the city, you hurt the economy, you hurt the moral fibers that build the city. So, just like Idi Amin in his supposed beautifying of the city and Trump's beautifying of DC, all he's going to do is create empty spaces, economic disruption, and a deep sense of fear. A fear that could turn into the anti Trump networks that we saw for Amin's. So, if you like this episode of The Continuum, please subscribe, follow. I plan on doing more, but this is a current events podcast and it will come out with current events. Thank you.